The afternoon sun hung low over Maple Ridge Drive, casting long golden shadows across lawns so perfectly manicured they looked like they had been trimmed with a ruler. American flags hung motionless from pristine porches. Luxury SUVs sat in driveways like silent guardians of suburban peace. This was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened, at least, not to the people who belonged here. Captain Elena Hayes drove slowly, her black Lexus gliding between the rows of identical colonial homes. She had just finished her first full day as the newly appointed commander of the Maple Ridge Police Department. Her uniform was still crisp, her badge polished, and her mind already turning over the mountain of paperwork waiting on her desk. She was 38 years old, a black woman who had spent 23 years climbing through the ranks of law enforcement, earning every promotion the hard way. Today should have been a quiet drive home. It wasn't. Blue and red lights flashed in her rearview mirror. A patrol car pulled up close behind her, its siren giving one short, authoritative chirp. Elena sighed, signaled, and eased her car to the curb in front of a house with a white picket fence and a perfectly trimmed hedge. She kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, engine off, windows down. Standard procedure. The first officer approached on the driver's side. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a crew cut and a jaw like a brick. His name tag read Officer Marcus Hale. He didn't ask for her license. He didn't ask for her registration. He leaned down, eyes narrowing as he took in her face, her neat ponytail, her tailored blazer. Out of the car. Now. Elena kept her voice steady. Good afternoon, officer. May I ask why I've been pulled over? Hale's face twisted. I said get out of the car, you filthy animal. Before she could respond, the passenger door flew open. A second officer, younger, thinner, name tag reading Officer Pike, reached in and grabbed her right arm, yanking hard. Move. Elena's seatbelt was still fastened. The sudden jerk sent pain shooting through her shoulder. She reached for the buckle with her free hand, but Pike was already pulling harder, dragging her halfway out of the vehicle. Her knee slammed into the doorframe. Gravel bit into her palm as she tried to steady herself. Hands on the hood. Hale barked. She was out of the car now, spun around roughly. Her cheek pressed against the warm metal of the hood. The smell of hot engine oil filled her nose. Cold steel clicked around her wrists, handcuffs biting into her skin tighter than necessary. You don't belong here, Hale growled, his breath hot against her ear. People like you don't drive cars like this in neighborhoods like this. Where'd you steal it from? Elena kept her breathing even. She had been in worse situations. She had faced worse men. But this was her first day as their commander, and these two officers had no idea who they had just slammed against the hood of a Lexus. From across the street, a neighbor's phone was already recording. Sofia Ramirez stood on her porch in yoga pants and a hoodie, filming silently. She had seen the whole thing from the moment the lights came on. Hale shoved Elena's head down harder against the hood. You deaf or just stupid? I asked you a question. My name is Captain Elena Hayes, she said clearly, loud enough for the phone to catch every word. Badge number 8249. I was sworn in this morning as the new commanding officer of the Maple Ridge Police Department. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hale laughed, a short, ugly bark. Yeah, right. And I'm the Easter Bunny. Keep your mouth shut unless I tell you to open it. Pike tightened the cuffs until the metal dug into bone. Dispatch, we've got a suspicious vehicle stopped on Maple Ridge. Female driver, uncooperative. Running her now. The radio crackled. A female dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. Unit 47, be advised. We have a hit. Captain Elena Hayes, badge 8249, confirmed as the new commanding officer. Sworn in at 0800 hours this morning. Repeat, she is your new boss. Silence. Hale's grip on her arm loosened. Pike took a half step back, his face draining of color. The two officers stared at each other, then down at the woman they had just thrown against her own car and handcuffed like a criminal. Elena remained perfectly still, cheek still pressed to the hood, wrists locked behind her back. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She simply waited, letting the weight of what they had done settle over them like concrete. Sofia Ramirez's phone continued recording. The red light blinked steadily. Hale finally found his voice. "Captain, ma'am, this was a misunderstanding." Elena lifted her head slightly, just enough to look him in the eye. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated. Her voice was calm, measured, but every syllable carried steel. "Unlawful detention. Excessive force. False arrest. Racial profiling. You call that a misunderstanding, Officer Hale?" Pike's hands were shaking as he fumbled with the keys to the handcuffs. "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," Elena cut in. "You assumed. And now the entire neighborhood is watching." She nodded toward Sofia's porch, where the phone was still raised. More neighbors had stepped outside now. More phones were recording. The perfect, quiet street had become a stage. A black SUV with department markings pulled up. Lieutenant Victor Lang stepped out, adjusting his tie, his politician's smile already fixed in place. He took one look at Elena, still cuffed, still pressed against the hood, and the smile faltered. "Captain Hayes," he said smoothly, "what seems to be the problem here?" Elena turned her head to face him directly. "The problem, Lieutenant, is that two of your officers just assaulted and falsely arrested their new commanding officer in broad daylight. And they did it on camera." Lang's smile disappeared completely. The afternoon sun continued to shine on Maple Ridge Drive. The American flag still hung motionless. But everything had changed. And the two officers who had thought they were teaching a lesson to a woman who didn't belong now understood, with cold, sinking dread, that they had just cuffed the one person who could destroy them both. The next morning, the lobby of the Maple Ridge Police Department was unnaturally quiet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long rectangles across the polished tile floor. Officers moved with deliberate slowness, their conversations dying the moment Captain Elena Hayes stepped through the front doors. Her uniform was immaculate, the captain's bars on her collar catching the light with every step. The sound of her polished shoes echoed sharply in the silence. No one greeted her. No one met her eyes. A cluster of uniformed men near the coffee station fell silent mid-sentence, their postures stiffening as she passed. The air felt thick with unspoken resistance. This was not respect. This was a wall. Elena kept her head high and her pace steady as she walked toward the briefing room. She had expected this. She had lived through versions of it her entire career. But today, on her second day as their commanding officer, the silence carried a sharper edge. Outside on the Civic Plaza, rows of folding chairs had been arranged in perfect lines. An American flag hung motionless behind a temporary stage. Cameras from local news stations were already set up, their lenses pointed at the podium like rifles. Mayor Richard Langford stood waiting, adjusting his tie with practiced ease. Lieutenant Victor Lang stood beside him, his face a mask of professional courtesy. The swearing-in ceremony was brief and cold. Mayor Langford spoke of a new chapter and fresh leadership, his words sliding over the crowd like oil on water. A handful of officers clapped politely when Elena raised her right hand and repeated the oath of office. The applause lasted less than 10 seconds. When it ended, the silence returned, heavier than before. Elena did not linger for handshakes or photos. The moment the ceremony concluded, she turned and walked directly to the evidence storage room in the basement. The clerk on duty, a young civilian technician named Amir Khan, looked up nervously as she entered. Captain Hayes, he said, already reaching for the logbook. What can I do for you? I need every body cam recording from Officers Marcus Hale and Officer Pike from yesterday afternoon. Full shift. Unedited raw files. Amir hesitated for half a second, his eyes flicking toward the ceiling, toward Lieutenant Lang's office on the floor above. Then he nodded and began typing. The footage loaded on the large monitor. Elena stood behind him, arms crossed, watching the timeline. The patrol car lights flashing behind her Lexus. The approach. The knock on the window. The moment Hale's fist slammed against the glass. Then the screen stuttered. A clean cut. 47 seconds vanished. The footage jumped forward to the exact moment she was already on the ground, face pressed to the asphalt, hands cuffed behind her back. The audio of Hale's voice calling her filthy animal and telling her she didn't belong had been neatly removed. Elena didn't blink. Explain the gap, she said quietly. Amir swallowed hard. It could be a sync error, Captain. Sometimes when the files upload to the cloud. A sync error that happens to perfectly match the exact moment excessive force was used? She turned to face him fully. Pull the server access logs for last night. Amir's fingers moved across the keyboard. A new window opened. There it was. 3:12 a.m. User access level, Lieutenant. File modification confirmed. Elena stared at the timestamp for a long moment, then looked through the glass partition toward the parking lot outside. Earl Voss, the Union president, stood near a group of officers beside their cruisers. His hands moved animatedly as he spoke. Even from this distance, Elena could read the message in his body language. They were circling the wagons. That afternoon, she walked into the daily roll call briefing room. The officers were already seated. The moment she entered, every conversation stopped. Effective immediately, she announced, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room, all body cam footage must be preserved for a minimum of 12 months. No editing. No deletions. Any violation will result in immediate suspension and criminal referral. Not a single officer spoke. But their eyes said everything. When she returned to her office, a plain manila envelope lay centered on her desk. No stamp. No return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single black and white photograph. Birmingham, 1968. A young black man on his knees, a nightstick raised above his head. Her father. Scrawled across the bottom in red marker were 4 words. Some things never change. Elena placed the photograph upright on the corner of her desk where anyone who entered could see it clearly. Then she sat down and continued typing her internal audit orders as if nothing had happened. By late afternoon, protest signs had appeared on the sidewalk in front of the station. Support our police. Outsiders go home. The signs looked fresh. The paint still glistened. Lieutenant Victor Lang stepped outside and gave a short statement to the small crowd of reporters. We need unity, not division, he said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. Earl Voss stood behind him, smiling faintly. Hours later, the police radio began lighting up with calls. Robbery in progress. Vehicle vandalism. Pharmacy break-in. But response times had mysteriously doubled. Units that should have been 3 blocks away took nearly 20 minutes to arrive. Elena watched the GPS tracking screen in the command center. The pattern was deliberate. They were trying to create chaos. To make the public believe that without the old guard, the city would fall apart. Her phone rang. It was Sofia Ramirez, the neighbor who had filmed the traffic stop. Captain Hayes, Sofia said, her voice tight with fear. Officer Marcus Hale just came to my house. He asked if I still had the video. He said accidents can happen in nice neighborhoods like ours. Elena wrote down every word. The war had officially begun. The clock on Elena's desk read 4:47 a.m. The rest of the station was dark and silent, but her office remained brightly lit, the only window glowing like a lone beacon in the night. She sat motionless, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. The email had arrived 23 minutes earlier. Subject: Notice of Investigation. She opened the attachment. The document was professionally formatted, cold and clinical. It accused her of serious misconduct during her time with Internal Affairs in Chicago, unauthorized access to sealed files, selective enforcement of discipline, and misallocation of departmental resources. The allegations were vague enough to sound serious, specific enough to damage her reputation, and timed perfectly, just hours before the city council was scheduled to vote on removing Lieutenant Victor Lang from his position. There was no concrete evidence attached. There didn't need to be. The accusation alone was the weapon. Elena leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly. She reached for the black and white photograph she had placed on the corner of her desk earlier that evening. Her father, on his knees in Birmingham, 1968, a nightstick raised above his head. The red marker scrawled beneath it still looked wet under the desk lamp. Some things never change. She traced the edge of the photo with her fingertip. The paper was worn, the corner soft from years of being carried in her wallet. Her father had taught her one lesson above all others: they strike hardest when you are closest to the truth. And right now, she was very close. She closed the email and opened a new encrypted folder. Inside were copies of every piece of evidence she had gathered so far: the missing 47 seconds of body cam footage, the server access logs showing Lieutenant Lang's login at 3:12 a.m., the financial records linking Blue Shield Consulting to Earl Voss's brother, and the hospital security footage of Officer Marcus Hale standing over Malik Turner's bed, issuing a quiet but unmistakable threat. She had spent the last 3 hours cross-referencing everything. Every allegation had to be backed by 3 independent sources. Every file had to exist in at least 2 locations outside the department's system. She was building a fortress. At 5:12 a.m., a soft knock sounded at her private side door. She opened it without hesitation. Samir Patel slipped inside, carrying a small USB drive. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I kept a full mirror backup of the entire server every Friday night," he whispered. "They deleted the original footage, but they didn't know about the mirror." Elena took the drive. "Did they see you?" "No. But they're watching everyone now." She nodded once. "Go home. Sleep for 2 hours. Then come back ready." Samir hesitated at the door. "Captain, they're not going to let this go easily." "I know," she said quietly. "Neither am I." By 9 a.m., the press had gathered on the steps of City Hall. The morning sun reflected off the microphones and camera lenses like a field of silver blades. Mayor Richard Langford stood at the podium, flanked by Deputy Chief Harlan Crow and Lieutenant Victor Lang. The latter wore a perfectly pressed uniform and an expression of solemn concern. The mayor cleared his throat. "After careful review of serious allegations received late last night, the city has no choice but to place Captain Elena Hayes on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal investigation." No one in the crowd gasped. They had been expecting it. Lieutenant Victor Lang stepped forward, his voice smooth and measured. "We take these matters very seriously. Public trust is our highest priority. Until the investigation is complete, all disciplinary actions initiated by Captain Hayes are suspended." The message was clear: the old order was reasserting control. Elena stood at the back of the room, still in uniform, badge and weapon already removed and placed in a sealed evidence bag. She had followed protocol to the letter. When Lang asked for her badge and sidearm, she had handed them over without hesitation, her face betraying nothing. Daniel Cho, the young officer who had quietly provided her with critical evidence, watched from the side entrance. His fists were clenched so tightly the knuckles had gone white. As the press conference ended, Lang walked past her, close enough for only she to hear. "Careful, Captain. Nice neighborhoods like ours bite back hard." Elena met his eyes without blinking. "So do I." That night, in the small kitchen of her temporary apartment, 4 people sat around a folding table covered with documents and laptops. The only light came from a single overhead bulb and the blue glow of screens. Samir Patel slid a USB drive across the table. "This is everything. Unedited body cam footage, server logs, financial transfers. They thought they erased 47 seconds. They didn't know I keep offline mirrors." Daniel Cho spoke next, his voice low. "Borden went to the hospital again today. He stood in Malik Turner's room while the boy was still unconscious and told his mother that accidents happen when patients are under sedation." Sofia Ramirez, the neighbor who had filmed the original traffic stop, pushed a new video file toward Elena. "He came to my house this afternoon. Asked if I still had the recording. Said nice neighborhoods can be dangerous for people who talk too much." Elena listened without interrupting. She arranged the new evidence in neat stacks, labeling each one with precise handwriting. Her movements were calm, almost meditative. At 3:17 a.m., she encrypted the entire package and sent it through a secure channel directly to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The confirmation email arrived seconds later, received. Investigation opened. Agents will contact you within the hour. She closed the laptop. The 4 of them sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, a black sedan cruised slowly past the building. Its headlights swept across the windows and disappeared into the night. Elena looked at each of them in turn. "They struck first," she said quietly. "Now it's our turn." The clock on the wall of City Hall's press room read exactly 11 a.m. The room was packed. Reporters from every major outlet in the state crammed shoulder to shoulder, cameras ready, microphones bristling like weapons. Bright lights bathed the podium in a harsh white glow. Mayor Richard Langford stood behind the microphone, his face carefully composed. To his right stood Lieutenant Victor Lang, uniform crisp, expression solemn and concerned. Behind them, Deputy Chief Harlan Crow and Union President Earl Voss completed the united front. The mayor cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the silent room. After receiving credible allegations of serious misconduct, he began, voice steady and rehearsed, "The city has no choice but to place Captain Elena Hayes on immediate administrative leave pending a full and impartial internal investigation." A ripple of murmurs swept through the press corps. Cameras clicked furiously. Lieutenant Victor Lang stepped forward, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Public trust is our highest priority. Until this matter is resolved, all disciplinary actions initiated by Captain Hayes are hereby suspended. We will conduct a thorough review and ensure accountability at every level." The message was crystal clear: the old guard had struck back. Elena Hayes had been neutralized before she could finish what she started. Then the side door opened. Captain Elena Hayes walked in wearing her full dress uniform, captain's bars gleaming on her collar, badge polished to a mirror shine. Every head turned. The room fell deathly silent. She did not ask permission. She did not wait to be announced. She simply walked straight to the podium, her steps measured and unhurried. The mayor's mouth opened, but no words came out. Elena looked directly into the sea of cameras and spoke with calm, unshakable authority. "I am here to release unedited evidence of corruption, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations within the Maple Ridge Police Department." She nodded once to the technician at the back of the room. The large screen behind the podium flickered to life. Raw body cam footage began to play. The patrol car lights flashing behind her Lexus. The approach. The fist slamming against the window. The door being ripped open. Her body being dragged out. her face pressed against the hot hood. The metallic click of handcuffs. And then, clear as crystal, Officer Marcus Hale's voice. "Out of the car, you filthy animal. Lo I nuko kong thwak vi kunai." The 47 seconds that had been deleted were now playing in full, unedited, undeniable. Gasps filled the room. Reporters leaned forward. Phones rose higher. Elena's voice cut through the shock like a blade. These 47 seconds were deliberately erased from the official record at 3:12 a.m. last night by someone with lieutenant-level access. She clicked to the next slide. Server access logs appeared in sharp black and white. Lieutenant Victor Lang accessed and modified the file. Lieutenant Lang's face drained of all color. His professional mask cracked. Elena continued without raising her voice. Next. The screen changed again. New footage. Jamal Turner, 16 years old, honor student, being slammed to the concrete. Blood spreading from his head. Officer Marcus Hale standing over him, baton still raised. Then came the financial records. Blue Shield Consulting, $500,000 wired to a shell company owned by Earl Voss's brother. No training sessions had ever taken place. Signatures forged. And finally, the emails. Messages between Lieutenant Victor Lang and a private investigator in Chicago arranging to fabricate a misconduct file against Elena to discredit her before she could expose them. The room was stunned into silence. Elena looked straight into the cameras. These are not isolated incidents. This is a protected network of corruption that has operated for years. At that exact moment, the main doors at the back of the room swung open. 6 FBI agents in dark suits entered, badges visible, moving with purpose. The lead agent, a tall black woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Victor Lang, Officer Marcus Hale, and Union President Earl Voss, you are under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, civil rights violations, and financial fraud." Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Lieutenant Victor Lang tried to back away toward a side exit, but 2 agents blocked his path. "You have the right to remain silent." Officer Marcus Hale, who had been standing near the back, turned and bolted toward the emergency door. He made it 3 steps before another agent tackled him hard against the marble floor. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the room. Earl Voss stood frozen, his face purple with rage and disbelief, as agents cuffed his wrists behind his back. Deputy Chief Harlan Crow quietly removed his badge and placed it on the table, his career ending in the same press conference where he had hoped to watch Elena's destruction. Mayor Richard Langford stared at the scene, mouth slightly open, as if he had just realized the ground beneath him had disappeared. Elena Hayes remained at the podium, hands clasped in front of her, watching it all with calm, unwavering dignity. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply stood as the truth she had protected finally walked into the light. Outside on the steps of City Hall, a crowd had gathered. Maya Turner stood in the front row, holding a photo of her son Jamal. When Lieutenant Victor Lang and Officer Marcus Hale were led out in handcuffs, the crowd did not cheer or jeer. They simply watched in profound, heavy silence. A silence louder than any victory cry. Elena stepped out last, walking past the flashing cameras with her head held high. As she descended the steps, she caught Maya Turner's eye. For one brief moment, the 2 women, one who had nearly lost her son, and one who had risked everything to protect him, shared a look of quiet understanding. Then Elena continued walking, the morning sun catching the silver threads in her uniform as she moved forward into the new day. The old order had fallen. And for the first time in years, the people of Maple Ridge could breathe. 3 weeks later, the air inside the Maple Ridge Police Department briefing room felt different. The same wooden chairs, the same faded American flag in the corner, the same smell of coffee and floor wax. But the silence was no longer hostile. It was respectful. Captain Elena Hayes stood at the front of the room in her dress uniform, the captain's bars on her collar now replaced by the silver oak leaves of a chief. The city council had voted unanimously to restore her fully and appoint her as acting chief during the department's restructuring. When the mayor read the announcement, there had been no grand applause, only a quiet, steady clapping that spread through the entire room. Daniel Cho stepped forward, holding the new badge in both hands. His fingers trembled slightly as he pinned it onto her uniform. "Welcome back, Chief," he said, voice thick with emotion. Elena looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "We don't start over," she told the assembled officers, her voice calm but carrying to every corner. "We start correctly." There was no celebration. No cake. No speeches about new beginnings. Elena simply walked out of the briefing room and went straight to work. 90 days later, the changes were no longer promises on paper. They were reality. Every officer now wore body cameras that uploaded directly to an independent cloud system no one inside the department could access or edit. Any attempt to delete or alter footage triggered an automatic alert to the FBI Civil Rights Division and the newly formed Community Oversight Board. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training, designed with input from civil rights organizations, became non-negotiable. Officers who had once laughed at the idea now sat through 8-hour sessions in silence. The blue wall had cracks. Light was finally getting through. Jamal Turner returned to school with a scar on his forehead that would never fully fade. But he walked taller now. When patrol cars passed him on the street, he no longer looked away in fear. He looked at them with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the rules had changed. His mother, Maya Turner, sat on the new Civilian Review Board, her voice steady and respected during every meeting. She no longer had to beg for justice. The system now had to listen. Officer Marcus Hale and Lieutenant Victor Lang awaited federal trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The 47 seconds of missing footage had become the most watched clip in the state's history. Their careers, their pensions, their freedom, all gone. Earl Voss, the union president who had orchestrated the resistance, resigned the day after the arrests. He left town quietly, his reputation in ruins. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the maple trees lining the station's parking lot, Elena stood alone in her new office. The nameplate on the door read, "Chief Elena Hayes." She looked at the black and white photograph of her father that still sat on the corner of her desk. The red marker words had been replaced by a small brass plaque she had made herself. Some things must change. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in." A young black mother and her 6-year-old daughter stepped inside. The little girl clutched her mother's hand tightly, eyes wide as she stared at the woman in the crisp uniform. "Chief Hayes," the mother said, voice trembling with emotion, "my daughter saw the news. She asked if she could meet the police officer who didn't bow." Elena knelt down so she was eye level with the child. The little girl studied her badge, then looked up into Elena's face. "Are you really the chief?" she asked in a small, odd voice. "I am," Elena replied gently. The girl smiled, a bright, fearless smile that lit up the entire room. "My teacher said girls like us can be anything now." Elena felt something tighten in her chest. She reached out and gently touched the girl's shoulder. "You can be anything," she said softly. "And you never have to bow to anyone who tries to tell you otherwise." The mother wiped away a tear as she watched her daughter stand a little taller. As they left, Elena stood at the window, looking out at the city she had sworn to protect. The scars from that first day, the handcuffs, the gravel against her face, the words, "You don't belong here," still lingered. But they no longer defined her. She had not won because she became chief. She had won because she refused to bow. And in refusing to bow, she had forced an entire system to finally stand up straight. Outside, the little girl and her mother walked hand in hand toward the parking lot. The child looked back once, waving at the window where Elena stood. Elena raised her hand in return. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Somewhere in the distance, a patrol car rolled slowly through the neighborhood, its lights off, its presence no longer a threat but a promise. Change had come to Maple Ridge. Not with noise, but with quiet, unbreakable strength. And it had begun the moment a black woman refused to lower her head.